So 302, Study Session 2, Human Culture, Introduction. In this study session, we will examine the concept and characteristics of culture. We will also point the factors that affect culture, learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to 1. Define and use correctly the term culture. 2. Highlight characteristics of culture. 3. Explain main influences that affect the culture of a people. 4. Enumerate the importance of studying Nigeria culture. Human culture. Every society has a culture. The word culture is so inclusive a concept that it is often defined differently by different people in different environments. Simply put, culture refers to the totality of the ways of life of a people. Culture consists of patterns, explicit and implicit, of and for behaviors acquired and transmitted by symbols, constituting the distinctive achievements of human groups, including their embodiments of artifacts. The essential core of culture consists of traditional ideas and especially their attached values. Culture system may, on the one hand, be considered as product of actions and on the other as conditioning elements for future actions. Edward Taylor, an anthropologist, has provided one of the most acceptable and comprehensive definitions of culture. He defined culture as that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, moral, law, custom, and other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. This presupposes the holistic nature of culture. It therefore refers to the length, shared and transmitted behaviors in society. Stated more simply, culture is everything which is socially learned and shared by the members of a society. Most social scientists today view culture as consisting primarily of the symbolic, ideonotional, and intangible aspect of human societies. The essence of a culture is not its artifacts, tools, or other tangible cultural elements, but how the members of the group interpret, use, and perceive them. It is the views, values, symbols, interpretations, and perspectives that distinguish one people from another in modernized societies. It is not material objects and other tangible aspects of human societies. People within a culture usually interpret the meaning of symbols, artifacts, and behaviors in the same or in similar ways. Culture can be divided into two major types, namely material culture and non-material culture. The material culture, also called ideational or explicit culture, refers to those aspects of culture which can be seen and touched. They are tangible and explicit. They include things like cutlass, computers, machines, etc. On the other hand, non-material culture or implicit culture refers to those aspects of culture which cannot be seen or touched but have a considerable influence on the behavior of the people. These include things like moral, belief, law, knowledge, ideology, etc. In other words, they are intangible and implicit. Characteristics of culture. The characteristics of culture are as follows. 1. Culture is learned and not genetically given. 2. Culture is transmitted from one generation to the other through the process of socialization. 3. Culture is dynamic because it changes from time to time. 4. Culture is shared between and among members of the society. 5. Culture is relative because what is acceptable in one culture may be detested by another culture. 6. Culture is adaptive because it enables people to survive in the environment in which they find themselves. On the whole, it is important to note that all cultures are equal and important to the survival of the people who practice it. The notion or attitude people always have that their culture is superior to other culture is called ethnocentrism. Moreover, there are times when people seem happy to pay more for imported goods on the assumption that anything from abroad is better. Therefore, when a person prefers a foreign culture to his or her culture, he or she is suffering from ethnocentrism, main features that influence the culture of a people. Culture, which is often defined as the totality of what we think, do, and have as members of the society, is not in itself stable and unchanging. In fact, no form of culture, however isolated from outside influence, adjusted to its environment, and conservative in its outlook, is truly stable and unchanging. The changes which nature undergoes with the passage of time are caused by certain factors. Such factors are transaction flow, functional interdependence, and congruency of values. Transaction flow. This refers to the amount of communication, interaction, and various forms of cooperation that exist between one cultural group and another. Cultural groups may have varying cultural traits like language, religion, racial adornment, living style, knowledge, and skill. The amount of communication, forms of interaction, and cooperation that have taken place between two varying cultural groups could be measured in terms of labor and occupational mobility, telephone calls, mails received, volume of trade, and the strength of social and political ties. The typical examples of transaction flow between two varying cultural traits could be seen in the case between British culture and the Nigerian culture, with the former transmitting our cultural traits and the later consuming them. For example, during the colonial mind, the European gained political control in Africa because they were able to weaken or destroy the authority of the local chiefs or rulers and their cultural values. Having achieved this, they would embark on resocialization by introducing their own dresses, habits, table manners, funeral rites, religion, education, roles, association, language, tasks, and methods of child rearing. All these are bound to affect and alter our traditional cultural structures, including the manifestation embodied in norms, cultural products, symbols, and social lives of our people. Functional interdependence. This refers to the situation whereby two or more cultures or varying groups could cooperate and function together, but such cooperation could be induced on one by the other. Before the colonial assault on African territories, various small communities were closely tied together to their land or water, and from which they derived their substances without outside interference. Since limited size and relative isolations were associated with homogeneity, stability, and resistance to change, these small communities were living happily with their cultural values fully preserved. When the colonial masters first made an inroad into their colonial territories, including Nigeria, they faced the opposition of the local chiefs, who feared the pollution of their culture by an alien culture. If these local chiefs had succeeded in warding off these early intervention in their territories, they would have protected their culture from outside influence and distortion. But because they failed to achieve that, they had no alternative but to allow the colonialists with their radical ideas to penetrate into their territories. In fact, many historians of the colonial era have contended that the reason why the British practiced indirect rule in our African territories and the French assimilation policy in our own territories was not unconnected with the sole aim of creating fertile ground for domestication and infusion of their political, social, economic system in their newly discovered territories. There was therefore no doubt that the functional interdependence between the British culture and that of Africa was not without force by the former or the latter. These, however, gave impetus to the partial transformation of African cultural values. Congruency of values. This refers to a situation whereby two or more cultural groups may have some cultural values in common. If two or more cultural groups can trade off some cultural values and norms, then a sense of common purpose could develop between them. This occurs when two or more communities, out of shared desire to achieve unity in diversity, may decide to integrate or disregard some of their cultural values to achieve the necessary uniting values. Importance of studying the Nigerian culture. As indicated earlier, the world culture is clearly so inclusive a concept that it is often defined differently by different people in different environments. Sociologists often define culture as the totality of what we think, do, and have as members of the society. In other words, culture is that complex whole which include knowledge, belief, art, morals, religion, law, custom, music, dress, food, language, occupation, and any other capacities acquired by man as a member of the society. Culture has three different principal components, such as institutions which govern behavior, ideas, that is knowledge and belief of all varieties, moral, theological, physiological, scientific, technological, historical, sociological, and so on, and the material products or artifacts which men produce and use in the course of their collective lives. The study of Nigerian culture is important to the citizens of for a number of reasons. These are: it is through the study of our culture that we can adequately acquire knowledge of the past history and tradition of Nigeria and its people. When in 1954, Sir Alan Burns, a well-known colonial administrator in Nigeria, that there is no Nigerian nation, no Nigerian language, and no Nigerian tradition. He was saying so with his little knowledge of Nigeria. He, however, went further to assert that Nigeria was inhabited by a medley of formerly warring tribes with no meaningful culture and only united in so far as they were governed by a single power. By learning Nigerian culture today, we have come to realize that Alan Burns had little knowledge about Nigeria. We study our culture because most of our social institutions, like marriage institutions, chieftaincy institutions, etc., are in themselves the culture of our people. Cultural studies of various ethnic groups therefore enhance our knowledge of these social institutions in our society. We study our culture because of the immense cultural values of our Asian culture in works of art. For example, that Nigeria is rich in Asian culture is evident by various works of art of Nok culture dating 500 BC to 200 AD. Igbo Ukwu culture 9th to 10th century, Ife art 12th to 15th century, Owo art 15th century, Benin court art 15th to 19th century. The Benin, Ife and Igbo Ukwu bronzes are ranked among the best of their kinds in the world. They serve as material evidence of Nigeria's pride and as the seat of some ancient African civilization. We study our culture because it is through our cultural studies that we come to live by it and practice it. For example, we come to live by our culture when we are socialized into it, and we come to practice it when we engage in such things like painting, carving, drawing, drama, dancing, etc. There is therefore no doubt that Nigeria today gained culturally from the initial cultural ingenuity of our people. Nigeria has for the past 2 decades produced world-acclaimed painters and dramatists and writers. We study our culture because it is through it that we can acquire knowledge of different cultural values of many ethnic groups in Nigeria. This enables us as planners to identify areas of need or otherwise of different tribal groups, as well as to identify areas of cultural uniformity and diversity of our people. We study culture because it is through it that we come to learn of our indigenous language, dance, music, art, and tradition of our people. By this learning, we are kept alive of what people think, do, and are as members of a society. We study our culture because it helps us to understand our society, its norms and values, as well as its productive resources, and how they can be harnessed and promoted to the greater good of our people. The study of our culture enables us to equip ourselves with the knowledge and techniques that help us to survive both physically and socially, and to master and control, in so far it is possible, the world around us. Summary. In this study session, we discuss the concept of culture and explain that culture is the total way of life of a people. We also examine some characteristics of culture, such as relatively dynamic, adaptability, etc. Furthermore, we discuss main influences that affect the culture of the people, such as transactional flow, functional independence, and congruency of value. Finally, we highlight the importance of studying the culture of Nigeria. This is the end of study session 2. Thanks for listening.